Libya's foreign minister says foreign interference in his country has stalled peace. Hear my exclusive interview with him, the first he's given since Libya's two main factions agreed a ceasefire deal. I'm Shuli Ghosh, and today's newsmaker is Mohamed Taha Siala. Just days after a new ceasefire deal was agreed in Libya, the nation's foreign minister says international forces are to blame for the failure to find a solution to the conflict. I sat down with him in his first interview since the deal was brokered in Paris by French President Emmanuel Macron. The 6-year conflict following the fall of Muammar Gaddafi has dragged Libya into chaos, with rival forces vying for control of the country. But the ceasefire has provided a glimmer of hope, as leaders of the two main factions, Fayez al-Sarraj and General Khalifa Haftar, agreed to try to work together and hold elections next year. But at the start of my interview with Foreign Minister Mohamed Taha Siala, I pointed out that many other ceasefires have failed in the past and asked him how this one will be any different.
I hope that it's going to run. I think there is a will when they start these meetings. There is a preparation meeting in Abu Dhabi before that. And there is a lot of preparation, other meetings with the advisors and the consultants. And at the end, we have this declaration with the 10 points, 10 very, very important points. They are basic for a peace agreement, the unity of the state, and then that the military command will work under the supervision of a political command. And then it is a civilian democratic state, and that the process of reconciliation will continue, and we are trying to accommodate almost everybody. So I think I am optimistic.
Do you have a timetable for elections yet? Do you know when they might be?
No, the timetable when it comes to election, because at the end this will be just a preparatory work, and then we'll go for election, both for the president and for the parliament. And it was agreed that this maybe happened within the beginning of next year, March, April.
It's good to hear that you're optimistic, because it's such a complex situation in Libya. So many different armed groups on the ground. How can you be sure that they will fall into line when nobody has any real control over them now?
No, I'm having, when I said that I'm optimistic, I'm having in mind the international community, the Security Council, the United Nations, the neighboring countries. All those are putting some pressure on the parties to come to a solution.
But one of the key players...
The people in Libya cannot afford waiting more than 7 years. I mean,
absolutely.
It is short of liquidity in the banks. It's the problem of security. It's a problem. I mean, they cannot afford waiting more.
Libya needs a solution, that's beyond doubt. But General Haftar has said, and he said shortly after that Paris agreement, that he didn't care about elections and that any ceasefire may be temporary.
Mm-hmm. It depends on the other parties, and we are depending on the pressure will be put in by the United Nations and Security Council. And you know that there is a new envoy to the area. This is Dr. Fayyad, with a good experience, and he's willing. And we need just the international community to help him.
How important is it to make this deal work, not only for the people of Libya, but also because General Haftar has such a power base in the east of the country? How important is it to make a deal which will end that grip on power?
I think if he starts the processing of uniting the army, then we can break through, because the army is not existing only in the east. There is another army in the west and the south. And if you are speaking about a country, there must be one army unified, and then all the weapons must come only would be in the hands of the military people.
See, this has been the huge challenge for Libya because
it is a challenge.
The government of
but
national...
it's not impossible. It is a challenge.
Well, the government of national accord was formed in 2015. It had the backing of the UN, but it has been unable to bring unity. Why not?
Why not? Simply because there are some obstacles. There are some countries putting their hands within our country. It's not the Libyans who failed to have the solution. They failed simply because there are a lot of penetration from outside.
Foreign interference.
Yes, foreign interference. There is, I mean, it's money coming in, it's weapons, and there is a good sign now because after this Paris Agreement, the Committee of the Constitution, who's preparing the draft of the Constitution, they finalized their work. They signed with a majority of 43 from 44. So this is promising as well. I think we have to put this to the referendum to the people. And this is a good sign, isn't it?
Do you think that there's a role for, I mean, what would be the role of General Haftar post-elections?
For the time being, he's chosen by the parliament as a commander-in-chief for the military. And if he wants to govern the country, simply he has to put himself in the election. Yeah.
So you talk about foreign interference. What kind of help and support do you need from foreign powers now? And are you seeing that kind of support that you need?
I think there is a little bit shift from those putting obstacles and helping some parties. There is a little improvement. They stopped that. There is no weapons coming in the country anymore. The same for financing. It stopped. So I think Egypt is doing a lot of work now in favor of the solution.
Because Egypt, UAE, Russia, they were all supporting General Haftar.
They are sitting with some parliament people from Misrata and some from the military people as well from Misrata, and they are trying to convenience some people who are putting some obstacles vis-a-vis the solution. So this is what we need.
Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, the chaos has allowed Daesh to gain a foothold in Libya. There have been successful attempts to battle them. What's your assessment of what the situation is with Daesh at the moment?
Of course, I mean, we witnessed a case of a failed country in the last 5 years, and because of that, Daesh, while they are receiving a tough attack in Syria and Iraq, they thought there would be a good haven for them in our country, and they jumped in Sirte. But the Libyans, they succeed to get them out of this.
They're out
city.
of Sirte?
Yeah,
Are they
it doesn't mean that it is the end.
I was going to say.
Yeah, simply because some of them are scattered around the desert. You know, it's a very, very vast desert. And we have a border, we have 4,000 kilometers and 2,000 facing the Mediterranean. Altogether, it is 6,000 kilometers, our borders. Sometimes you need the army of China to control it. So simply they are scattered here and there, and but our people are following them. Our border with Algeria is completely sealed, with Egypt it's sealed as well, and there is a small problems vis-a-vis Chad, Niger, and Sudan. Sudan as well, they are sealing their border now, and you know that there is also, I mean, the Europeans, they are, because of the migration, they are.
Yeah. I'll ask you about the refugees in a moment.
They are doing a lot of effort in the Sahel area. This is in Mauritania, in Mali, in Chad, Niger.
And just on the subject of Daesh, it was a huge victory for Libyan forces to get Daesh out of Sirte. One of the things this Paris deal does is allow both sides to carry on fighting terrorists even when there's a ceasefire in place between them. How big a problem are the terrorists? I mean, you say that there are still scattered pockets of them around. How big a problem is this for Libyan security?
Now Tripoli is very secure. It wasn't before, and So the area where there is a good security is enlarging, and the other areas where there is a problem as security is concerned, they are shrinking, and this is, I think this is very good. And
is Libya getting help in the fight against terrorists?
Yes, we are getting help. We are getting help, and we are getting help as well from the European Union. And almost the Sophia operation is sealing our border with the Mediterranean. It's completely sealed. They started with the phase 1, where they are just controlling the weapons coming in, and then it is developed for the immigration, and then it's completely sealed, and they are doing a lot of effort vis-a-vis capacity building for our Coast Guard.
But that hasn't stopped the immigration problem, though, has it? There are still many people trying to get out of Libya.
You cannot stop it. This phenomenon started from the presence of humanity on the planet. You cannot stop it, but you can reduce it. You reduce the negativeness side of it, but we are not expecting that it is the end of this phenomenon. You know, many countries are built on this phenomenon. So we are trying to eliminate the negative side of it, and we use it to accommodate some of those migrants. When we have our development scheme, they are looking for work, and they find their work. So they are not creating any problem.
Do you feel that Libya is unfairly criticised by the EU for not doing more to stop the flow of refugees? Because, of course, it's Europe that ends up with all these tens of thousands of people flooding onto their shores.
Actually, we started negotiating a frame agreement with the European Union from 2007. It took us 3 years. I remember 10 rounds in Brussels and in Tripoli. And we are not sharing the same idea vis-a-vis the migration. They believe that we can stop them, and we have to stop them in our local waters, and we have to take them back to our country, which was not the solution. We told them that the solution must consist of 3 or 4 principles. First of all, you have to help us to protect our southern borders by putting a network, electronic network, in the border, some helicopters and some land cruisers, so you protect them jumping in. This is the first case. Second, you have to help those countries of resource for a development scheme, small and medium-sized projects, so you create more job for them, so their youth would not be even thinking to immigrate. And now they are helping. I mean, after the visit of Gentiloni, before he jumped in as a prime minister, he visited West Africa, and he's speaking the same language as we did. And now they are financing a development scheme in Niger of $50 million. The same for Chancellor Merkel when she visited Mali, speaking the same language. So now they start speaking the same idea how we can solve the problem.
And of course,
and they tried in Sofia. The third phase, they want to jump in our territory, in our waters. So if they call them, they return them to Libya. And we told them this is impossible.
If the Paris deal works, that could, we hope, bring stability to Libya. Stability in Libya would go a long way towards solving the refugee crisis, wouldn't it?
Yes, yes, yes. You cannot solve the problem without security in Libya, simply because when it started only some problem in some pockets, but now it is around, and then there is organized crime as well, and they are financing terrorism from the proceeds from the migrants themselves. They are getting a lot of money. The estimation of the United Nations that this is around $1 billion. So they are financing terrorism for migration, and some of the immigrants, illegal immigrants, they are converted to Daesh. So it's. Do
you think that was one of the goals of Emmanuel Macron when he brokered this deal between Mrs. Raj and
Sure. There are a lot of signs. First sign started when they reactivated their base airbase in north Niger in Madama. That base was silent since 20 years, and then now they are reactivated, simply to control the movement of migrants. Yeah, they are trying to do a lot of effort. They are helping the Sahel countries now, both financially and building capacity.
Well, there's certainly going to be a lot of people watching closely to see what happens in Libya now. Thank you very much indeed for speaking with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
In a moment, will a tight election in Kenya lead to more violence in the country? And we ask what Iraqi Shia cleric Muqtada al Sadr is doing in Saudi Arabia. Now, we're 1 week away from Kenya's general election, anticipated to be a highly volatile contest between President Uhuru Kenyatta and opposition leader Raila Odinga. Already, a senior election official has been kidnapped, tortured and murdered. And in some parts of the country, thousands have reportedly fled their homes, fearful of the kind of post-election violence that killed 1,100 people in 2007. Yvette McCullough has more.
There's no doubt that he was tortured and murdered. In our mind as a commission, the only issue is who killed him and why.
Mourning the death of a top election official that sparked fears of violence in Kenya. Chris Msando was found murdered just days before Kenyans head to the polls. He was in charge of overseeing the electronic voting and tallying system, a system the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, or IEBC, says will ensure a credible election, but one that the opposition says could be used to rig the polls. Local media reported that Msando had received death threats before going missing last week.
I demand from the government that they provide security for all employees of IEBC for us to give Kenyans a free and fair election.
This election sees long-time political foes, incumbent Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, once again facing off. Both men have accused the other of underhand tactics in campaigning, with Kenyatta saying Odinga is trying to incite violence, and Odinga accusing Kenyatta of planning to rig the results. Msando's death has raised fears that trust in the IEBC process may be put at risk, and that Kenya could see history repeating itself. In 2007, Odinga called for protests after election vote counting was abruptly stopped, and his opponent, Mwai Kibaki, was announced as the winner. The protests led to 2 months of politically motivated ethnic violence. Around 1,200 people were killed and more than 500,000 displaced, traumatising the country and shocking international observers. In 2013, Odinga also claimed he was robbed of victory after electronic voting machines failed. This time around, the polls suggest the race between Odinga and Kenyatta will be as tight as it's ever been, raising the stakes and making the role of the IEBC even more vital.
I think the mood is one of trepidation, or people not knowing what's going to happen, or people leaving, people are saying, if the only reason, and the only reason for which I will lose my life is voting, why should I vote?
Kenyatta and Odinga have said they will accept the results if the elections are free and fair. But with tensions and mistrust already high, will the IEBC be able to deliver each candidate's definition of free and fair? Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
Well, we have a panel of guests joining us now from Nairobi. Firstly, Jessica Masila. She's the Executive Director of the Masalendo Trust, an organisation that promotes participation in politics. Next, Macharia Munene. He's a Professor of History and International Relations at United States International University. And Otsenio Namwea, Africa researcher at Human Rights Watch. Good to have all three of you with us. Otsenio, let me start with you, because the murder of the senior election official, Chris Msando, it's raised a lot of questions, hasn't it? Because he was involved in developing a new electronic voter registration system, and people are saying that he was murdered because of it.
Well, so far we are still hoping that investigations will be able to unravel who exactly was behind it, and that eventually the law will take its course. However, the very act of the murder of the official speaks a lot and speaks volumes about exactly what is going on in the Kenyan electoral environment. First of all, the elections body has been under a lot of pressure for the past couple of months for various reasons. Definitely the elections body has its own share of blame, but we have seen a lot of targeted attacks on the elections body.
When you say the election body has a share of the blame, what do you mean?
I think there have been moments when it could have communicated differently. So there have been some moments when the kind of communications that has come out of the commission has contributed to the attacks that it has faced over the couple of months that have passed. But that does not actually justify some of the attacks that we have seen against the commission of late, including the murder. The murder itself, even before we know what exactly transpired, is worrying because it is targeting a very senior official, not just a senior official, but an official who holds crucial information about the running of the election and the electronic transmission system of the results. And the issue of transmission of results in Kenya is a very sensitive issue, given that in 2013, that was the bone of contention. There were allegations that actually certain parties infiltrated the commission's system and managed to manipulate the results to the advantage of others.
Let me put that to our
area, and the murder of that official.
Let me put this to our other guest, Macharia. This is a huge issue. First of all, the kind of technology that's being used to count votes and transmit results. Secondly, the position of the election board and the fact that there have been allegations of vote tampering in the past. How much is this undermining public confidence in the upcoming election?
Well, the attack on the IBC has been right from the beginning. There are people who are bent on discrediting institutions right from the beginning. The evidence is not the issue. It's the attempt to undermine the institutions so as to create an environment in which there can be electoral confusion. So it is not so much that the IBC has weaknesses, and it does have weaknesses. It is the fact that some politicians, irrespective of who is in the commission, are bent on discrediting Kenyan institutions for whatever reason
but as far as the actual election goes, Macharia, as far as the upcoming election goes, is there a fear that there's going to be some kind of vote tampering? I mean, presumably you're going to vote. Are you confident that your vote will be counted and counted fairly?
Yes, I have a lot of faith in the IBC, and the Constitution mandates it to be the one to run the election. I'm confident that my vote will count, and the way to be counted is the way to announced, and there will be no untoward behavior. So the IBC will do its job properly. There may be attempts by some people. There always are some people with weird notions to change the reality, but that would not work. I have a lot of trust in the IBC to do the right thing.
Jessica, do you agree with that? And is that a fair assessment of how the public see the election body? Do people have confidence in that? And is there going to be a large turnout?
Actually, I want to support what Namwaya said. There is high mistrust against the whole, their political class. Yeah, and so the one thing that we were all counting on was having an election process, the electronic system being able to ensure that there's no tampering with the vote. Because, of course, the vote tallying, especially of the presidential vote, has been the bone of contention in the 2007 and 2013 elections. And so in this particular one, there being a loss of life concerning that, especially for Mr. Msando. Mr. Msando was somebody that I actually had to deal with in the course of my work. And I feel very aggrieved as a Kenyan, knowing that he was so confident of the systems he had put in place. And it just makes people wonder whether IEBC will be able to rise above this situation that it finds itself in at this juncture. The one critical thing to know is that the communication, as on this one, at least there has been a united front. Way they have communicated on this particular issue, because we have seen the commissioners and the CEO of the IEBC speaking from the same script. It's not always been so, and so I hope this will still maintain trust, because IEBC came into this election not having such high public confidence, but I think if they continue reading from the same script and making sure that they have concerted voice, they may be able to just pan through this process.
Okay,
this particular period.
Obviously, there's a lot of scrutiny about the election that's going on in Kenya. Let me read some examples of how people saying votes could be rigged. Busing in supporters to particular constituencies, paying people not to vote, polling stations failing to use biometric technology, stuffing the ballots, and according to the Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights, having the dead come back to vote by registering deceased voters. Otsieno, is there little surprise that people are worrying about how this election's going to go, given particularly the fact that the race is so close between the two main rivals?
What I can say is that all those concerns are based on the history of Kenyan elections for the last 20 or so years. Kenyan elections have been, there have been a lot of questions around how the Kenyan elections are managed. And because of concerns about how the elections are managed, Kenyan elections have always not turned out very well. Like in 2007, which everybody remembers, it turned violent, and part of that violence were perceptions, was caused by perceptions that the election was rigged. And the reason why people are raising all these issues, ballot stuffing, manipulation of the system, these are experiences people have had in the past, and they have seen it happen, and they're just trying to watch out to ensure that this does not happen. Because in the end, what people are concerned about is no matter who wins, the process needs to be free and fair.
Absolutely. And let's talk about some of the factors that could lead to violence. For example, when the result comes out. Now, Kenyatta's camp has said that they will accept the results if they consider the vote to be free and fair, which is a pretty big caveat. Mashiara, what does that mean? If supporters don't believe that the election was fair, there could be violence?
Well, there may be some people preparing for violence. Just as it was in 2007, there were people who spent a lot of time preparing to disrupt the election if they don't win. And the violence started long before the election anyway. So there could be that. Now that caveat of the candidates say that they will accept only if they consider it to be this or that. I think it's not a very encouraging thing. We have had it before, because it removes the power, the ability to run the elections properly from the IEBC, which is the only organ which is mandated to declare who the winner is. Now, once the referee has blown the whistle, it is not for the player to say that he should not have blown the whistle that way or that way. And there are mechanisms for appeal and rectification of perceived wrong. So the caveat in itself is maybe something to be of concern to everybody.
I think it's a huge concern. I mean, and I think people are already concerned, Macharia, because a lot of people are leaving their homes, particularly in areas which were flashpoint areas before in 2007, because already they're predicting that there will be violence. So people are bracing themselves for the worst, aren't they?
No, I think they are overstretching their imagination. I don't think there will be that violence. The concern is good for people to be concerned about safety, but the claim that there will be violence is far-fetched. The last time we had such problems, of course, the state was not prepared. It seemed to have been caught off guard. I think this time, people concerned have taken the right steps to ensure that the election will be peaceful. Those people who vote are expected to vote and get out of the way, go and watch things in the right place. So there will be no violence.
Okay, let me put that to our other two guests. Jessica, do you agree that the notion that there could be violence is far-fetched? Because tribal divisions are always a factor in Kenyan elections. And of course, that's what led to some of the worst post-election violence after 2007. And there are already reports of some violence in areas which were badly hit back then. So do you think the notion of violence is far-fetched, or in fact, is that something that a lot of Kenyans fear?
It's very real. It's very real that we are likely to have violence because, of course, according to the latest polls, they are saying that the race is very close between Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. And of course, you know, as the tally starts coming in and people see maybe one of them is breaking or is moving ahead, it's likely that in the areas where people, if the people in an area are very pro the government or pro the opposition, you may find the people who are against the government may be feeling insecure or attacking the ones who they consider pro-government and that kind of thing. I know today I've had real conversations with people about stocking up of supplies. I know I've seen people sharing on social media how they are going to the different shopping areas to just make sure that they have enough dry foods in their houses. I've seen, I have on good authority some information that people in the slum areas are already starting, actually they started moving about a month ago, moving their essential goods, thinking just so that in case their houses are attacked, they do not feel vulnerable.
That is astonishing to hear that people are going to those lengths because they are so worried about violence, Jessica. Why is it not the fact that political leaders are doing more to calm these tribal divisions, or do they just leave them because that's their political power base and so they actually want those divisions to continue?
They may not be coming out and speaking to necessarily a tribal base, maybe not mobilizing on tribal basis, but the reality is people have experienced this in the past. And once bitten, twice shy. So you make sure you're not going to be caught up in a situation where I find myself living in an area where I may be vulnerable. So I'm having to think, I've already told somebody, in case I don't feel secure where I live, then I will have to move house to a more secure area, just for the reality that I don't know how people are going to react. And there are some calls that, that there are some areas where the governor call vote is going to be critical, the presidential vote may be critical and contentious. And so those particular ones may cause people. So we have to be alive to the reality that violence is likely.
Well, we certainly all hope that there will be peaceful elections in Kenya. Thank you very much indeed to all my three guests there, Jessica Masila, Macharia Manene and Otsieno Namwea. Iraq's influential Shia cleric, Muqtada al Sadr, has made his first official visit to Saudi Arabia in more than a decade. Many see the move as an attempt by Riyadh to gain more influence in the war-torn country and undercut their regional rival, Iran. But Riyadh and Baghdad have not always seen eye to eye. It was only in 2015 that Saudi Arabia reopened its embassy in the Iraqi capital. So observers are wondering what Sadr, whose forces have historically been funded by Iran, aim to accomplish in the kingdom. In a moment, I'll put that question to Iraq's ambassador to Turkey. But first, here's more from Shoaib Hassan.
It's an unlikely alliance to many. The leader of Iraq's most hardline Shia party with Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Muqtada al Sadr emerged as one of Iraq's most powerful Shia clerics after the fall of Saddam Hussein. His anti-US militia was accused of killing hundreds of Sunnis between 2004 and 2008. All that while being backed by Iran. He remains one of Tehran's main proxies in the region. But recent events suggest a falling out with Iran. Thousands of Sadr supporters demonstrated in the streets recently, calling for political reform in Iraq and also an end to foreign interference.
The Iraqi people are demonstrating to demand that members of the Electoral Commission and its unjust electoral law be replaced. This law serves the interests of some parties in power, unfortunately. This commission has never been independent.
Sadr is not alone. Other Iraqi leaders have spoken out against the government. Despite the Iraqi military's success against Daesh, its popularity has continued to fall. And the continued support by Iran has angered dissenters, especially Sadr. 5 of his supporters were killed in clashes with police earlier this year. That marked his re-emergence as a key power broker in Iraq and a possible search for patrons other than Tehran. That's a position its eternal rivals in Riyadh could be willing to fulfill. Shoaib Hassan, the Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now in the studio is Hisham Al-Alawi. He's the ambassador of Iraq to Turkey. Good to have you with us here. So this is an interesting visit, isn't it? A Shia cleric supported by Iran visiting Saudi Arabia. What's that all about?
Well, it's not only the recent visit which is interesting. I think the various activities and high-level visits that have happened between Iraq and Saudi Arabia are all relevant and important to look at. As you know, in February, there was a historical visit by the Saudi Foreign Minister Adil Jubair to Baghdad. That was looked at as a clear indication of the change in the Saudis' position as far as opening up relations with Iraq is concerned after the bilateral relations discontinued in 1990. Following that, we had the important visit by Prime Minister al-Abadi to Saudi Arabia in June. Subsequently, the two governments have decided to establish a high-level coordination council. We recently had an important visit by our Minister of Interior, Qasim al-Araji, and that was followed by a high-level visit also from Saudi Arabia to Iraq. The two countries obviously are neighbors. There are common interests, there are common threats that face us, and it makes sense, obviously, to work together to address those issues and enhance the relations. The recent visit by Sayyid Muqtada al Sadr is important because it gave the recent developments another dimension. I think we all know that the countries in the region have suffered a lot in the past decade or so because of the rise of sectarian tension, the rise of extremism and terrorism. We have so many conflicts in the region that have led to political instability. There is a need for the countries to work together to complement each other economically and trade.
There have been a lot of differences, and one of the things that Saudi Arabia is very worried about, of course, is the Iranian influence in Iraq. Is this perhaps a strategy by Saudi Arabia to try and undercut that influence in Iraq? And if it is it going to work?
Well, as you know, various officials in the kingdom, in Saudi Arabia's kingdom, have been talking about certain measures to enhance their regional influence and counter the rise of Iranian influence in the region. In Iraq, we look at things in a different way. We are not interested in maximizing regional negative competition between Saudi Arabia and Iran, or Turkey and Saudi Arabia, and so on. We certainly believe that we need to work together in order to resolve those conflicts, create political stability, reduce sectarian tension, promote tolerance and peaceful coexistence, work more effectively together to counter terrorism, and that would help to create the right environment that will enable us to complement each other economically, trade-wise. There has been an agreement to increase the number of border gates between Iraq and Saudi Arabia. We are likely to see direct flights between the two countries. There is interest in increasing the Saudi investment and contribution to stabilization of those cities that have been damaged, as well as reconstruction. And those represent a win-win situation for both countries.
So ties have improved in the ways that you've mentioned, and Saudi Arabia is obviously a pretty powerful ally to have in the region because it is so rich. Is that one of the things that Iraq is looking at when it looks towards a future of rebuilding in Iraq? It's
one of the features we have obviously taken into account. The other important thing also to highlight here, we want to have good, balanced relations with all our neighbors. We don't want to have good relations with only Turkey or Iran. We also want to have good relations with our Arab brothers and neighbors. And Saudi Arabia, as you know, is an important country in the region and in the Arab world. The same with Jordan and so on. So as far as we are concerned, we look at those activities as part of our policy to open up as far as our relations are concerned, particularly with our neighbors, and hopefully that would help to address those issues that I just referred to, including resolving some of the conflicts in the region and working together to promote tolerance and counter the rise of extremism and terrorism.
But why Muqtada al Sadr? Because he is someone who has reinvented himself as the former head of a militia which was responsible for thousands of sectarian killings. Now he's an extremely influential anti-government protester. His influence has brought out thousands of people on the streets to protest against the government, what he says is corruption and poor governance and poor services. Is he the one you want trying to mend ties between Sunni and Shia?
Well, obviously, he is an influential leader. He has many supporters. He has a significant number of MPs in the parliament. I won't classify him as anti-government. I think, as you know, he's
very anti-government. That's what he set himself up as a critic of Haider al-Abadi.
He continues to expresses himself to say that he's a supporter of Prime Minister Abadi, and he obviously appreciates the positive achievements.
He has spoken out openly about corruption in the government.
Yeah, he calls for reform. We all call for reform. We know that.
And and that's what he says, that his protests and his rallies that he calls are to put pressure on Haider al-Abadi to push through these reforms. Well, so he is a bit of a thorn in the side for the government, isn't he?
Well, the Prime Minister himself obviously is keen on having those reforms, and it's been difficult to move as fast as he wishes to see, given the challenges that we have in Iraq. The past 3 years, as you know, have not been that easy. We had the security challenge, and we have done extremely well in terms of liberating our cities and provinces. And the recent victory in Mosul was a remarkable achievement. We feel very confident that we will see the end of Daesh in Iraq, hopefully by the end of this year. In terms of the economic challenge, as you know, because of the significant drop in the prices of oil, that wasn't also a major challenge, and the government has done well to take us through those difficult 3 years, more so when you take into account that there was also an increase in the defense expenditure because of the war against Daesh. I think Iraq has also done well when it comes to developing our relations with our neighbors. We've managed to move away from tensions between different countries in the region, and we are now looked at more positively, and potentially we could play a positive role in reducing tension between the different regional powers, and hopefully that would help to create the right environment that we need to see in the region.
Yeah, better relations are going to be crucial because, as you've said, it was a great victory in Mosul. But now the Iraqi government is facing the problems of trying to rebuild and reconstruct in Mosul. The Iraqi government says it wants something like $100 billion in a 10-year national plan. How is the Iraqi government going to get that money? How important is it to have foreign assistance?
Well, obviously we have made it very clear that we appreciate any support we have received in the past few years. To maximize our efforts against the terrorist organization of Daesh. We know very well that restabilizing those cities and towns and rebuilding them will need a lot of resources. That's why we look forward to having as much support as possible from our friends in the region and beyond. There is no doubt that the level of materialistic damage that has happened, whether in Mosul, Nineveh province, or in Salah ad-Din, Anbar, and other provinces, is significant. And I don't think the figure of 100 billion over 10 years is a big figure. We know it will take probably that much or even higher, a higher figure to not only restabilize but reconstruct those cities and enable people to have their livelihood back. We are encouraged by the level of voluntary return to the provinces and cities that have been liberated. The government has a comprehensive plan. There is a task team that is led by the Secretariat General of the Council of Cabinet. He's working with provincial governments as well as with the UN to provide the basic services, to maintain peace and security, to reopen the schools and healthcare facilities, and to then continue, inshallah, with the reconstruction processes.
So one other side effect of the battle for Mosul was that it did cause tensions with Turkey, because Turkish forces that obviously went into northern Iraq to help Peshmerga fighters take Mosul. You've said in the past that Turkey and Iraq need to work together to get over their differences because that is beneficial to the region. Has there been progress made towards that? Are you happy with the way the relationship between Turkey and Iraq is progressing? Because there could be other tensions over the next battle, which is Tal Afar.
We certainly believe it would be very important to resolve the Bashika camp issue and have full withdrawal of the Turkish military forces from Bashika as soon as possible. Prime Minister Yildirim, during his visit to Baghdad in January this year, promised Prime Minister Abadi to do so. I think the recent developments on the ground in terms of the liberation of Mosul, the liberation of Sinjar, and hopefully the liberation of Tal Afar that is likely to happen very soon, would create the environment that will make it easier for the Turkish government to take that decision and withdraw their forces. We certainly believe that the two countries need to work together to enhance cooperation in various areas. I mean, there are, as you know, common threats, security threats that face the two countries. And certainly there is a great potential to enhance cooperation in this area. We are concerned about the significant drop in the volume of trade between the two countries that has happened in the past 3 years. Iraq was the third most important trade partner for Turkey and the second most important trade export destination for Turkish products after Germany, based on the figures that we had in 2013. So there is a need to have the right environment to enable us to work towards increasing the trade volume back to the highest levels that we've seen. We are making good progress when it comes to resolving some of the differences we had as far as water resource management is concerned, the Euphrates and Tigris River. There is also a great potential to enhance cooperation in the energy sector, which is likely to be a win-win situation for both countries.
So plenty of scope for
and so
discussion.
And in order to achieve that, we certainly need to have the right environment, and resolving the Bashir camp issue will help us to achieve that.
Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Pleasure.
And that's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Shuli Ghosh. Next time, why rights groups say police are attacking refugees in Calais. Until then, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.